Welcome to the latest episode of Capital of Combat. The name says it all. I'm your host, Hakeem Branch.
Rob Geale.
And today we're going to be recapping the HBO Boxing After Dark card from this past Saturday, August 17th, along with the UFC Fight Night, which happened the same night, August 17th. We're going to start with HBO and then move on to the UFC. In HBO Boxing After Dark, we had Nathan Cleverly versus Sergey Kovalev in the opening fight, and the main event was Darren Barker versus Daniel Geale. We're going to start with Kovalev versus Cleverly. Play, Rob.
Now, Hakeem and I were talking about this fight before it happened, and we hadn't seen much of Cleverly. I think I had seen one fight, then we kind of watched a few fights of his on YouTube, and we noticed a few things. He doesn't have a lot of power, and he likes to overwhelm his opponents with punches. He is undefeated, or he was undefeated, and he only had a handful of knockouts, and with those knockouts, they were TKOs, which means he wasn't ending people. It was more likely from an accumulation of the punches, and the referee would have to stop the fight. Now, that's a big contrast to Sergey Kovalev, who doesn't really have great athleticism or even great technique, but he is extremely heavy-handed. His last few fights did not go past the third round, and it all ended in vicious knockouts. Now, as we discussed this, again, we weren't quite sure about how the fight would go. We had seen plenty of Kovalev on NBC Sports, but not enough of Cleverly make a really confident decision. But fortunately, we was right about the decision. Kovalev came into the fight. He wasn't very fast. Nathan Cleverly had the speed advantage, but Kovalev had the power advantage, and he used that to his fullest. Nathan Cleverly, being as fast as he was and throwing as many punches, he wanted to drag Kovalev into deep water and try to test his stamina. But in order to do so, he would have to make Kovalev respect his power, which unfortunately he had none.
Right. His whole plan was to take Kovalev into deep waters and drown him with his activity. Unfortunately, Kovalev had no respect for his power, and Cleverly was landing at will throughout the fight, even though the fight only lasted 4 rounds. And that's the reason why it only went 4 rounds, because Kovalev had no respect at all for Cleverly's power. You could see, even in the first round, Cleverly was landing a fast, stiff jab that Kovalev just walked through. You could even see the redness on his face that the punches were landing. He just didn't care. He was in there with a seek and destroy attitude, and nothing was going to stop him from steamrolling Cleverly, which is what he did with 3 knockdowns in the fight, setting him up with hard power punches, hard punches to the body, and just relentless aggression.
Now, with Cleverly's jab, it was effective to a point, but because Kovalev didn't respect it, he would throw an accumulation of punches back. And as Cleverly threw and landed his jab, Kovalev would shoot his jab the second after Cleverly shot his. And we can all tell that Cleverly was more affected by that jab. Not only that, but he was more willing to go to the body of Cleverly, and that really slowed him down.
Oh yeah, and that's what led to such a quick stoppage. Like Rob said, we talked about this fight, we weren't really sure. We weren't really confident in our prediction. We predicted that Sergey Kovalev would get him out in about 8 rounds. We thought Cleverly would put up a little bit more resistance, but that's because we hadn't really seen a lot of him. And he showed us some good things. He was very accurate, he was very busy, but at the end of the day, the power of Kovalev was just too much for him. And so now Kovalev is the mandatory for the winner of the fight between Bernard Hopkins and Karo Murat, which should be happening sometime soon. I believe it's in October.
That's right.
Let's move on to the main event, which was Daniel Geale from Australia, who had the title, versus Darren Barker from England, who was the challenger for the evening.
Now, this was a great fight. Darren Barker was a taller fighter. He had the better boxing skills, but Daniel Geale, like a lot of Australian fighters, are very tough, very rugged, and very come forward. And Darren Barker could be drawn into a slugfest, and that's exactly what we got. Darren Barker really had the greater activity, but not by much. But he had the more telling punches. Daniel Geale did a lot more slapping, and he didn't have quite the pop that Barker had on his punches.
And even with that, he still managed to drop Barker. I believe it was the 6th round. He caught him with a nice body shot and a temple shot combination that put Barker down and had him very hurt. But Barker hung on, regained his composure, fought back, and started to use that more effective aggression, the more pinpoint punches, and outworked Geale to win a split decision and take the belt home with him.
Now, the thing about Darren Barker, he did one thing. Again, it's another fighter who decided he was going to go to the body and try to slow his opponent down. The only problem is, because he was a taller fighter, when he opened up to throw the left hook to the body and the right around the left guard, Geale could come upstairs because there was an opening. He just didn't do it enough. Even when he did it, he just didn't have the pop to make Barker respect him. There were openings, he did take them, but Darren Barker, just the activity was just enough to get him the win. Most of it was power punching. There were some jabs, but not really necessary to this fight. You just saw two tough warriors go at it. Darren Barker came on top with a split decision, and he'll be moving on to fight either mandatory or possibly another middleweight champion.
Yeah, he might get Peter Quillen, who's the WBO champion in that weight class. Depending on how long, he may be pretty damaged from that fight. I say probably the beginning of the year they might make that fight. If you didn't catch it, make sure you watch it on HBO on demand, because it was a great fight and you love the back and forth action that happened between these two combatants. Let's move on to the UFC Fight Night, which was the inaugural fight of FoxSports1 that just opened up for business this past Saturday. And the first fight we're going to talk about is Uriah Hall versus John Howard. And in this fight, we had a guy who was highly touted from his time in the Ultimate Fighter series, which was Uriah Hall. He had some scary knockouts. I mean, he sent 2 guys to the hospital, knocked out another guy before making it to the finals. And he had people literally afraid to fight him. And when you have trained professional fighters afraid to fight you, you have exhibited some serious skills. The problem is, he was not mentally able to keep up with that. You could see it when he knocked out Adam Seller with that spin kick, and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, man." Like, you don't apologize to your opponent. You know, you guys step into that cage or that ring with the knowledge that you guys are there to separate each other from your senses, and it might happen, and you guys are both in agreement that if it happens, it's part of the job. You don't go apologizing to that person. You might say, "Hey, great fight." You might check to see if they're okay, but you don't apologize to them. And I think that kind of messed with Uriah Hall, his mental makeup, which led to his last 2 losses against Kelvin Gastelum in the final and John Howard on Saturday night.
Yeah, confidence is a big key to fighting. You have to have the confidence that you know you're going to take this guy out and have the killer instinct to do it. And he really hasn't exhibited that as an official member of, or official fighter for UFC. And if he's going to be successful, he's got to start taking guys out, pushing the pace, and showing them that he is better than them. It's not just talent, but that those extra intangibles to show that he is better than any guy he steps into the octagon with.
Oh yeah, I think that's one of the reasons he lost this fight, and the fight with Gastelum. He's backing up the whole time, where these guys are allowed to push the pace and try and get to him, and he's not being active enough. When he throws his hands, the guys back up, they're afraid of what he can do, but he's just not doing it enough.
Right.
Like, he's throwing his jab is very accurate. The guy has skills. He's got skills. It's just, I don't think he wants to hurt his opponent, which when you're fighting, that is the objective, is to hurt your opponent. So we're going to see what happens to him in the future. Maybe he can get over this. He'll have a talk with Dana and his people, and, you know, maybe he can get over that hump. But anytime he gets in the ring, it's must-see TV to see if he can get those exciting knockouts that he's known for.
Oh yeah, that's right. So hopefully this doesn't deter him from being a fighter, but he needs to find that point in which he could say, I'm here to stay.
Right.
Now, we're going to move on to the next fight, which was Alistair Overeem versus Travis Browne. Now, Overeem was the heavy favorite coming into this fight. While he was a shorter fighter, he was definitely the stronger, bigger, and more skilled fighter. And in this fight, he pretty much roughhoused Travis Browne with his kickboxing and Muay Thai. There was a point where he had Travis Browne against the cage and was using knees, elbows, and just was trying to wear Browne down. He didn't take him out, but you can see the difference in ability and strength.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would have complained had they stopped that fight in that first few minutes when Overeem hit him with the knees. Browne dropped to his knees. Overeem landed some more combinations. Browne was able to get back to his feet. Overeem hit him with another knee, and he went down again. And had the ref stopped the fight, I don't think anybody would have been upset. They wouldn't have said, hey, that was an early stoppage. Browne was in a lot of trouble at that point. The problem was, the ref didn't stop the fight. And Browne had the courage and determination to stick through it and let Alistair Overeem shoot his load. And then he was able to land some good punches and strikes of his own, ending with the final front kick that knocked Overeem out.
Now, with this one, Travis Browne was, again, pretty much overwhelmed. But once he found his space, he went to plan Z because nothing else was working against Overeem. And that was that front kick. He started to throw it, and started to see gradual success. It just happens that that last one landed right on the button and took Alistair Overeem out. Once he got hit with it, legs got shaky, he had the glazed look in his eye, and he was going down.
Travis Browne down immediately.
And Travis Browne jumped on him. That was the end of the fight.
Oh, yeah. And one last note on this fight. A lot of people, like we've heard from various websites and other publications, even comments on Facebook, that ever since Overeem had got popped for steroids, that his chin isn't that great and he's not looking as good as he had before. We have to remember, in his last two fights, he was winning these fights handily. He just didn't have the finishing capacity to take his opponent all the way out. Now, another thing we have to remember is that Alistair Overeem, before this, had been knocked out 10 times. This was number 11. So his chin was never that great to begin with. It was just that he was so much more explosive and powerful than his opponents that he could take them out. And that was before, even when he was in the light heavyweight division. Steroids don't really make you into like this big hulking Superman the way people think they do. They're more so for recovery and to replenish your body as much as not to make you stronger. It's a side effect. You do become strong because you can work out more, because you recover faster, but it's not I just shoot something in my arm and all of a sudden I'm He-Man. Next fight is Uriah Faber versus Yuri Alcantara, who we haven't seen a lot of, but I saw one fight of him online, and the guy pretty much did exactly what he did in this fight. He's a buzzsaw. He goes right after you. He's trying to finish you as soon as the bell goes, and he almost had Uriah Faber with a couple of submission moves before Uriah's experience and championship pedigree took over, and he began to dominate the fight.
Now, Yuri is a world-class jiu-jitsu practitioner. Now, with that, he showed right away with the hip toss as Uriah Faber rushed him at the opening bell that, hey, this isn't going to be easy. If we're going to the ground, it'll be on my terms. And that's exactly what he did. He had him in trouble all throughout the first round as it was on the ground. He went for a leg lock, a Kimura. But again, Uriah Faber has that experience to weather the storm and to escape. So once we enter into the second and third round, you can start to see the difference. While Uriah Faber has good stand-up, he decided to go to his wrestling, in which he was able to use his strength and athleticism to put Alcantara on the ground and go for the ground and pound, which again was very precise. He just wasn't throwing punches. They were all measured and they were on point. And I think Alcantara was not used to that.
Right. I mean, strikes from that position are very powerful. And then the strength and power of Uriah Faber to begin with is very, very high level. He came down from featherweight, so he's a big guy to begin with. Alcantara wasn't that big. Like, you could see the size difference of the two opponents in the ring. Uriah Faber looked like he was a good 2 weight classes above him. And that size and strength really started to wear down as the fight went on, which led to that successful ground and pound, which got Uriah Faber the decision.
That's right.
Go on to the main event, which we had Chael Sonnen versus Mauricio Shogun Rua. And I gotta say, this fight surprised me. I didn't think that Chael Sonnen would use jiu-jitsu, of all things, to secure the victory. Especially, he said some pretty disparaging things about jiu-jitsu practitioners, especially before and after the first Anderson Silva fight. And lo and behold, he used it to secure the victory. So Chael Sonnen knows how to use his mouth to keep himself in the fights, but he can back it up as well.
Yeah, this was very surprising. I thought Rua was going to use his Muay Thai and Jiu-Jitsu to kind of draw Sonnen into a mistake, which Sonnen does make a lot of mistakes, especially from a dominant position. But he used, again, that Jiu-Jitsu, and of course he's a world-class wrestler, so Rua is not really very good at defending against takedowns, and that's right up Sonnen's alley. I mean, he was able to take down Anderson Silva, and he was able to take down Rua the same way. I mean, they're not great wrestlers, so take it to the ground, see what you can do.
Yeah, he took him to the ground immediately. As soon as the bell sounded, he went straight for the takedown, put Rua on his back, and he was never in this fight. That's it for tonight, guys. Thanks for watching. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel because we got a lot more great things coming for you. Make sure you like the video so more people can see the video. Share it with your friends, and we'll see you guys later.
Peace.
My demons are in a rage. Keep thinking that it's a game. I kick rhyme, hurricane. I told them I don't play. I'm liquid.
Black Street Fighter.